My name is Yada. I am one of the board members for TextGiving. I specifically work with education and outreach. But outside of that, I work at Webflow, which is a sort of website development and design company. So feel free to connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn if you have any questions about either of those. But today, our guest is the CEO and founder of Inside Voices. We will get into what that is exactly, but at a high level, it really helps job seekers, specifically people of color, to learn about companies before they're applying and to hear from current employees. So I want to take the time out right now to welcome Ekow Sanni-Thomas. Thank you for coming.
Hey.
Hello. Awesome. So first question, the best way to get started is to really just introduce yourself. Again, high level, we'll get into the nitty gritty later on, but just sort of how you got into this, your journey into tech, and if you want to do a quick one sentence about Inside Voices before we get into what it's really about.
Sure. So hi, everyone. As you heard, I'm Ekow, the founder of Inside Voices. Inside Voices is an online platform that helps job seekers understand how companies really treat people of color before you get there. As many of you will know, the diversity statements that companies put out don't necessarily reflect the environment once you arrive, and it's too late to find out that you were misled once you've already joined the company. So we're providing an opportunity for you to hear from other employees who are already there, get the truth, and then make a decision with full information. How did I get here? Well, sadly, I ended up building Inside Voices as a result of my own bad experience. I joined a company that had a great vision to the boxes. Next thing, terrible experience, finding out that I'm just the last in a long line of Black people to have that terrible experience at that company, and realizing that without Inside Voices, there was no way to really share the truth and protect other people like me from an environment that was just not set up for me to succeed. It didn't sit with me well that I could just leave and someone else could fall into that trap. It felt dishonest, and so that's why I built Inside Voices. I got into tech very much by learning how to solve my own problem. I just started building, found a way to develop my own solution, and haven't looked back since.
I love that. And yeah, we are definitely going to get into the second chunk of your intro in terms of just like what was the tipping point to get here and advice that you have for others. Because I know I can speak for myself and probably a lot of people on this call, we have been in a similar situation where it's just like, what is this? So yeah. I want to quickly, because there are a few people at the conference and definitely in this session who are early career tech or tech switchers or people who are just really looking to get into this tech journey. So wanted to hear just sort of your path as a whole, not necessarily only Inside Voices, but just like your career as a whole. What has that been like? Has there been opportunity where you've sort of wanted to shift from different careers, et cetera? Just sort of your journey and call outs from that.
Yeah, so I actually graduated from university with a mathematics degree and went straight into finance, where I hated my job every single day, but showed up and gave it my all, and I was a top performer. And one of the lessons that I learned way too slowly was that actually being a top performer does not mean that you will succeed and rise quickly. I did not play the game anywhere near as much as I should have. The true reality is that if I had just taken 10% of the time I was spending working and applied that to networking and befriending coworkers, getting coffee with partners, then I would have moved a lot quicker and I would have had more opportunities. It was only really once I started to befriend people that had power did I start to see that kind of momentum. So after 11 years with Ernst & Young in the UK and then in New York, I decided to leave to go to another fund. At that organization, you didn't move around as much. And that was where I found out that if you are somewhere where you only have one person sitting above you, that relationship is imperative. And another lesson that I learned was that if you join somewhere, you should not only be vetting the company, but be vetting your direct supervisor to identify whether they are committed to the company.
Yes.
Because the manager that brought me in, I liked him a lot. He was a great guy. He was on his way out when he brought me in. And when he left, he left me in the storm, you know?
Oof.
And that was that, you know, like he just like
Yeah.
he left me to the wolves, and then everything went downhill from there. So I wish I'd spent more time understanding like how long he'd been there, what his route to success was, like he to take like as much as he was asking me, and then having to leave that and find my way into tech. My next lesson was really that by being interested in something isn't enough to drag you into it. There's a lot of discourse. Like, we live in the information age. There are conversations happening all the time about groundbreaking technologies, and every single new thing that comes up is an opportunity for you to get advantage. You know, a few years ago, it was no code. Right now, I would say it's AI, and how you can use things like OpenAI and ChatGPT to your advantage. Like, we should be, if you really want to crack into something, be at the forefront of the newest discoveries, and then see if you can carve out a niche in that.
Right, right. Perfect. And I love sort of how you started, you got a degree in tech and you went into finance. So I think this is a common thread for a lot of people in tech, just sort of not majoring or not focusing on what your study was at school or any of the courses that you've taken. So for everyone in the audience, there is ample opportunity to shift. It's really not just sort of this, like tech degree that people can get. It's experience, it's interest, it's a whole bunch of things. Thank you for sharing that. So definitely want to spend the rest of the time getting into just Inside Voices, the work that you've done, and also advice on just how to navigate this tech space, because as we all are probably familiar with, there are not a lot of people who one, look like us, two, at a management, director, even VP level, who look like us. And because of that, it has a huge impact on us, just like regular tech employees. So I'm really excited to dive into this. Earlier, you mentioned that you were sort of basically your user at the end of the day. Something happened to you at work where you were just sort of exposed to, what happens to a lot of us on a regular basis. But I want to take a step back, specifically 2020, when a lot of, this wasn't new to us, but it sort of was put on the forefront in media, news outlets, et cetera, just like how we are being treated in the workplace. And so want to talk about from your experience with Inside Voices. I'm sure so many companies, as we've mentioned, kind of do, quote unquote, performative task. They'll put a blog post up like, hey, we hired 10 Black people kind of thing. And so I want to just, from a person coming into a company, they're excited about the company, but it's not, where they need it to be in terms of true core DEI initiatives. What is the first step that we should take to really understand and learn more about a company from that perspective, outside of, this is a cool place to work at?
Yeah, so I mean, when we apply to companies, after we go through the application process and the interview process, they seek references, right? They speak to our previous employers, and sometimes they want personal references. They want to understand, okay, I've got my own judgment on who this person is, but what do people say about this person? We should do the same. Right, we should be seeking references on companies. Inside Voices is an opportunity to do that. But if there isn't a review on Inside Voices, or you really want to hear it from someone's mouth, hit LinkedIn, speak to people who work there, and even better, speak to people who don't work there anymore, who look like you, right? Like those people who've recently left or left in the last 6 months, they're going to give you the most honest, unvarnished view of what it's like to be at that company and be a person of color at that company. And with that comes the fact that not all of us are having the same experience. If someone had asked me at EY what it was like to be a Black man, I would have given them a very, EY probably would have got like a 6 out of 10. But I know there were people at the same company that would have given it a solid 2 or a 1 out of 10. So just know that, you have to canvass a few people to get the right opinions, to get a fair spread. But at the same time, make sure you are asking the questions. Like, don't go in blind and then just expect it to be different.
Right.
And listen, sadly, I think we all have already developed thick skin. Like, we know that going into these places, we are going to be subject to microaggressions. We know stuff is going to happen. Like, you're already ready for that. So don't feel as though, unfortunately, there's probably not going to be an environment where that's not going to happen at all. That is our reality. One of the things that I personally look for is, are there examples, or can I find threads that lead me to understand how a company will react when I do say something's happened and I need you to do something about it, right? Because that's the point at which you find out what a company is. Like, if you say, hey, someone at the holiday party harassed me, or my manager was racist to me, what will the company do? And are there any examples that anyone can speak to that can show you what the company really stands for? Because that's usually where the rubber hits the road.
Right.
But in terms of the day-to-day experience, your team is going to be the biggest determinant. So as much time as you can spend with them to understand what they're really like. I was telling someone the other day about, it's funny, like, Black people, we have, probably all people of color, but particularly Black people, we have a sixth sense for when someone doesn't like people who look like us. Let your sixth sense be the guide. Just get in the room and let them talk, and you will know. You'll feel it inside. You'll be like, yeah, something about this person isn't sitting well with me.
Okay, I love that, because I never even really put a name to that gut feeling. And yeah, it is a sixth sense. It's like, within 5 seconds, you pretty much already know where this is going. So yeah, trust your gut. I feel like trust your gut is a common theme with everything, honestly. So the point about the how we have this like inherent thick skin just with how the world works and how they view us, and then also recognizing that you mentioned there's likely not going to be a situation where there aren't microaggressions on a regular basis. So for someone, it can get tricky because obviously we want to ensure that we are not getting fired or people aren't looking at us sideways, etc. So like, when these things happen, how can we navigate? And I think initial reaction is to go to HR, and sometimes HR isn't on our court. They're there for the company sometimes at the end of the day, and so that can be a muddy situation. So when we do experience these things, like, what is your advice on how to handle? Like, do you have a bar for there's 10 microaggressions, this is when I need to go handle something, or is it like one and we're out? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's actually a fantastic question. So I actually have what I would consider to be a counter opinion on this. I think this is a hard take. I think we should be addressing these. They happen. Unfortunately, that does require us to address them with grace. Like, you probably have to, wait to calm down, and then approach this person with kid gloves, like you're talking to a child. Like, right now, we hear a lot of conversations around this new style of parenting where parents never shout, and they kind of coddle their children around, like the fact they've done something wrong. And that actually helps the child to learn without the child feeling like punished. I would say you have to apply that same approach when you're speaking to someone in your company that's, perpetuated a microaggression or done something to you, as long as it sits below a certain level, right? We're talking about, microaggressions, things that can be corrected behavior. Now, once we start to get above that level, there's this gray area in which HR can help to stop the behavior, but you're not going to get justice.
Right.
And I think that's something that people also have to understand about just the way that companies work, right? Like, we come out of schools and universities where we're used to seeing justice, people being punished for things, but there is no real mechanism for punishing someone in a company without firing them. And as a result, if you bring one of these like gray area, mid-level issues to the forefront, you may be able to get the behavior to stop, but it's unlikely that someone's going to be punished to the way that's going to make you feel satisfied. So you just have to accept that first of all. But I would suggest still raising it with HR to have the issue stopped. And if you don't feel comfortable going to HR, you should have a mentor, right? You need to have someone senior in your organization who is outside of your actual team, who is ready to go to bat for you, who will be a third party in a conversation with you, who can help move that conversation along and grease the wheels. They will
Yeah.
have more experience. They'll be more knowledgeable about the how the organization works. They'll understand the different characteristics and personalities that are involved, and have them just join you in the conversation. And then there's those top level ones where someone does something horrific, and obviously in those situations you should hopefully feel comfortable going to HR. Are you always comfortable going to HR? That is the big question, and that's really why that's really why I say when you're joining the company, you should be shaking the tree to understand what is this company at its core. Because listen, HR don't want lawsuits. Simple as that, right? They're about risk mitigation and risk management. So their feeling is, we don't want this person to do this thing, and we don't want to be liable for the fact that they did this thing. You need to understand, when I bring these like high level evidence-based, like really severe issues to the forefront, what are they going to do? You should have identified that when you got there. And if you've identified you're in an organization that does care about you, then yeah, raise it. Let them tackle it. Let's have them stand up for something. At Insight Voices, in the last few months, we actually rolled out a new platform for companies that uses feedback to help them build a better DEI policy and DEI strategy. But actually what we're also doing through that is we're helping employees monitor their own sentiment, because one thing we identified is that particularly for underrepresented employees, we suffer in silence with these and suffer from death of 1,000 cuts with these small things that just keep eking away at us for 6 to 12 months. And then we leave having never actually sought the support that is available in the companies. Now, if you've joined a company where you have a DEI leader, or there is a senior person of color in the organization, or you have an HR department that actually is supportive, you should be reaching out for help, but you want to reach out for help early enough so that you don't get to the point where you need that justice, because like we talked about, HR can't bring you that justice. And so our platform tries to push people toward that support earlier.
Yeah, I love that point. I never really actually thought about, sure, HR can help correct the behavior, as you mentioned, but at the end of the day, are we looking for the behavior or the justice? And a lot of the time it's the latter, and that's just not going to happen at a company, usually. So that's a really good way to frame that. One thing you mentioned in this answer is evidence-based sort of, content, or I don't know, sharing that with HR. Can you talk more about that? Because I think they're, suffering in silence. A lot of us will internalize and then just not document or, share anything. Can you talk more about the value of evidence-based content?
Yeah, for sure. So one thing we hear a lot is make sure everything's documented, right? Whenever people are talking about discrimination cases or anything like that, people talk about, make sure you're getting it all down on paper. It is important when you are speaking to HR and you think you have something credible to have that evidence available. And it helps, particularly where you have an HR department that is supportive, one that is ready to take action, to be able to provide that. Because we all know, I've done videos about it on TikTok. The immediate response to something racist happened to me is, oh, I think you misunderstood it. Oh, I don't think it went down that way, right? They're very ready to tell you that it didn't go how you said it did. So witnesses are fantastic, documented notes are fantastic, and those things should be taken with you. Now, full disclosure, I'm not going to pretend that that's going to get you everything that you want. One thing that I don't think we clarify enough when we tell people to make sure you're taking notes, and documenting everything that's happening, is that is actually for if you decide to go down the lawsuit route. That is actually not going to, if HR are not going to take action, they're not going to suddenly start taking action because you provided evidence. All you're doing is putting yourself on the outside. There was a really interesting TikTok video I saw this week from this guy, Dan from HR. And he was actually talking about when you get laid off and people were saying they tell HR, I'm going to contact my lawyer. And he was saying, you should never tell HR you're going to contact your lawyer, because as soon as you tell them, they're obligated to tell the company's lawyers, and then the company's lawyers will start building a case against you. So all conversations that you have should be framed around the fact that this is an internal issue, and I don't necessarily expect there to be punishment, but I do need the behavior to stop. This is the evidence that the behavior has happened, just so you can understand and follow the trail. Now, please take action on this, and let's just put this behind us. you really want to couch. And unfortunately, you have to coach and train HR and make them feel comfortable to take action. Let them know that there is action they can take that you'll accept. And then when you get in there, you need to push them towards it. Let them know what needs to happen. Hopefully they take that action, accept that you're not going to get the justice that you want, but at least then you can move on in the organization without suffering from this thing continuing to happen. It's a travesty that we can't get justice, but it's just our reality.
Yeah. I guess the next question I sort of have is as an employee, what should we be holding our employer accountable for? Maybe employers too large, maybe like our manager or our team or our company, like where, and this isn't me, invalidating anyone's thoughts, but it's like, when do we really recognize, okay, this needs to be addressed versus like, I can handle this how I'd like to, like, what is the bar? What should we hold people accountable for?
I think we need to, first of all, you have your own personal threshold. What can you take? Right. And I think often earlier in your career, you can accept a lot more than you would later in your career, because at a certain point you get worn down. You're like, hey, I've done enough. I shouldn't have to sit with this anymore. Like, this is ridiculous. And, there's more at stake. But beyond that, your company has a legal responsibility to protect you from discrimination. This is not about, I thought you guys were my friends and I thought you protect me. No. This is their legal responsibility. We are seeing a huge uptick in EEOC complaints in the last couple of years. I think particularly this year, we've actually started to see companies, the DEI conversations died down. Companies think they're like out of the woods. But for me, speaking to the people, I know it's not even close to being true. Like, our voices are louder than ever. We're angrier than ever. We expect more. I think that rubber's going to hit the road at another inflection point in the next couple of years. But in the meantime, just make sure that you know where your own personal threshold is. Make sure you're monitoring it. Make sure you're discussing with people. You should have community inside and outside of your workplace that you can discuss these issues with. And I think actually one really helpful way to decide whether you can accept the behavior that you're living through is to speak to people about it that are in similar positions in other companies or in other teams, and just tell them. And you'll see from their reactions whether they're like, yeah, that sucks, but we can survive, or, whoa, I've never had that treatment. You should do something about
it. Yeah. And I think the allyship piece, again, huge 2020, buzzword. Everyone is like, put me on, I'm an ally, etc. Which, is fair. Like, that could be, how someone wants to show up. But I think related to that, and for some companies, especially in tech, they have, employee resource groups, things that are usually identity based, where people of that identity at the company can come together for community. How have those played a role, if at all, in sort of some of the reviews that you've been seeing, or just the general sort of morale and well-being of employees? How have they played a role in this?
Yeah, I think ERGs are fantastic for building internal community. And I wish that was all they were responsible for, because right, because companies try to make out as if ERGs are going to fix their racism issue, their discrimination policy. But it's like, the people in the ERG are not the reason that you have that issue, right? It's the people that are not in the ERG. Like people of color are not racist to ourselves. Like, we're not the reason that we can't progress. So yes, that's fantastic for community. You actually kind of see an arc often when people join an organization, particularly when they're industry shifters and they've joined a new organization, particularly with a very active ERG, and you see this arc of, okay, like, I'm new to this ERG, now I want to participate more, I really want to get involved. And then you see it start to trail off as the reality of the fact that the ERG can't protect them from everything becomes clearer, and that the responsibilities of being in the ERG extend beyond what they're personally getting to doing PR for the company, speaking on panels, representing things that they don't actually, they don't care about and they don't speak for. The other day, there was just about 2 weeks ago, near the start of the World Cup, the captain of the US soccer team, black captain for the first time ever, and he was asked by an Iranian journalist how he can represent the US, knowing all the things the US does to black people. And he gave this like non-answer answer, because like, what else
Mm.
is he going to do, right? Like, he's on
Yeah.
the world stage. And everyone was calling this non-answer answer like classy. They were like, what a classy answer. You know, he talked about progress. And I was just like, that that was, first of all, that was under duress. Like, that was basically a hostage video. Like, that
Yeah.
man had no choice. And we, as particularly when you join an ERG or you're one of few at an organization, you're often put in those situations where you give those same hostage videos. They're like, hey, Black
Yeah.
History Month is coming up. Will you speak on this panel on behalf of the company? Will you do? And we're just out there like towing the company line. And we all know, we're hearing each other speak, and we're like, that doesn't sound true. Like, these,
Mhm.
like, this half speak about, yeah, you know, they're really doing the work, but you know, unfortunately the statistics don't reflect that. All that additional work, that's free, right? That most companies are getting that for free. And so while I love NERG for what you can get from it, make sure, personally, I think everyone needs to make sure that they are checking their own bandwidth, and ensuring that they're not doing work for someone else that they don't necessarily believe in.
I love that. And yeah, going back to the Black History Month, if I see like one more MLK montage or like just cry, like it's too much. It's too much at this point.
Yeah.
Going
Well,
to
this
back
Black
to
History Month is going
yeah.
to be very interesting, right? Because we've seen companies doing layoffs. We've seen companies lay off their
Yes.
entire DEI team, right? We're seeing companies pulling back in a very big way from DEI, and it's going to be the first Black History Month after that's happened. I want to
Mm,
see what those same companies are going to do.
yeah, yeah. Good point. Good point. Going back to Inside Voices, what are some of the sort of themes that you've been noticing from the reviews? I think sometimes it's easy to feel like you are alone in whatever experience is happening at work, and you know, now there's a platform that has a bunch of very candid feedback from these companies, and so I wanted to hear just from your experience, what are the themes that you're seeing a lot of these tech companies, or employee reviews from the tech companies?
Yeah. So the first is very few companies are doing a good job.
Mm.
I wish I wish there was better news to report, but that's just the reality.
Mhm.
You know, you do find that the bigger companies have more people saying positive things, but they also have the negative cases. One thing I think we just have to accept is that every single company is going to have some good and some bad. There's no company that's going to be all good,
Yeah.
which is sad, but that's the reality. There's these edge cases always. Another thing is that, so when we dig into the data, one thing we find is that women, black men and black women actually report the exact same, for almost all of the different areas except treatment. And when it comes to fair treatment, we see women reporting way lower scores, saying that the company is mistreating them. So it's really about the intersectionality there of
Yeah.
race and gender. We also see, so we do allow, say allow, we do encourage allies to
Mm.
report on the platform, and tell us what the organization is like, because our questions are about what the organizational outcomes are for people of color, not just about people's individual experiences. One thing we see is that actually you often find that, at any company, the white people will rate the company lower overall, but be more likely to say that they would recommend the company to a person of color, which I think is an interesting distinction. Like, they're like, yeah, I know it sucks. I think it sucks more than you do, but you should still come work here. That's interesting.
Oh.
Um, yeah, that's a wild one. But yeah, I mean, when you read the reviews, you find these cases. You know, one of the reasons why we built this software platform for companies is because not just in reviews, but after review, you could actually book a call with me, particularly in the early days. And that was really for me to get better feedback from users about the product. But what people actually wanted to do was share their personal story, with a human being. And like, you know, after the calls, people would send me like reams of evidence as if I was going to do something with it, just to support that, you know, what they
Yeah.
told me. But I just kept seeing the same trend. I joined the company and everything was going great. And I was ambitious and I really wanted to kill it. And I was doing a good job. And then something bad started happening and it kept happening and it kept happening and it kept happening. And then either I left without telling anyone, or I raised it when I got to my boiling point, and then I left as a result because they couldn't fix it fast enough. And that was really why we built the software platform, because we said, okay, how do we get those people to raise it earlier? Because yes, still some of them will not be able to get the issue fixed, but some will. And hopefully by getting that fixed while it's still manageable, before you feel like it needs to be punitive, before you feel like that person needs to be fired, we can get it resolved and keep that person in the workforce, and then they can continue to get the network that they need and the experience they need to progress. Because one thing that is literally, every single company that's on the platform is a lack of representation in leadership. Like every company scores 1 or 2 for representation in leadership on the platform. And we have to change that if we're going to have any progress.
Yeah. I mean, do you think companies are listening or will listen? You mentioned sort of at one point, maybe in the next year or so, the rubber's going to hit the road and then they're going to need to be held accountable again. What are your thoughts on, ensuring that we're not repeating this cycle of like seemingly caring and then 2 years later, whatever. And then again, it's just like this constant push and pull. Like how do you think Inside Voices has a play in making sure companies listen permanently and they're making actual effort and change within?
Yeah, I mean, there was lots of conversation in the last couple of years about DEI being good for the bottom line. And I don't think any of us, or most of us, did not really believe that our companies believed that, right? We could tell through the lack of action and the promises that weren't kept that they didn't really believe they were going to make more money if they became more diverse, because if they really thought they were going to make more money, they would have done it a lot quicker, right? So accepting the fact that, like, okay, the business case isn't necessarily something that they really believe in, they are doing it actually as a result of pressure. Really, the DEI work that companies do is a result of external pressure and also internal pressure. Every single company is made up of hundreds, thousands of people just like you and me who care. And those people, the vast majority of whom want companies to do a better job when it comes to race. Unfortunately, we're very easily distracted. And so it does go through those boom and bust cycles. We are probably going into a bust cycle right now. Now is the time, unfortunately, to accept that our voices are not going to be heard as loudly, but we can take this time to build infrastructure so that when we hit that next inflection point, we are ready to capitalize on it. These moments, they do come. You can even see when you look at who the president is at any time, that has a significant impact on whether people are ready to stand up. Like they feel like they have something to fight against if the president is not someone that's in favor of diversity. And then if he is, they're like, well, things aren't going that badly. Right. So now is the time to be building infrastructure, to be preparing ourselves, gathering the voices, making sure you're protecting yourself. We're going into, we're in a bear market, we're entering a recession. It's going to be more difficult to get jobs in the coming time. And as a result, the voices of employees are not going to carry as far. We're not going to be as strong. But when that moment does come, we have to grab as much power as we can, make as much progress as we can in those moments, and then go back to building.
Yeah. And I think there are a few questions in the chat that kind of tie to that. Like you mentioned earlier, when you're interviewing, you should be interviewing them as much as they are you, like asking questions about, these things that are top of mind for you. And so when you are new in the workforce and you're feeling, again, some pressure to just show up and accept, what can you ask? What are some of the questions and topics that you can bring up, whether it's to, the hiring manager or other people in the team, or even what do you look for when you go to Inside Voices to check out the company? Like, what can we do to own sort of our experience in this space when we're first starting out?
Yeah, so personally, I would be looking for, depending on the size of the company, right? So if you have a smaller company or a smaller medium-sized company, if we're under like 2,000 employees, then you really are trying to get a feel for the culture as a whole. Questions I'll be asking are, when was the last time the company made a change that was a result of employee feedback, right? You're actually not going to be asking questions specifically related to race, but more about what is the feedback mechanism within this company and how do we get change? Because if I'm almost certain that I'm going to enter this environment and something about it is not going to serve me, is there a way for me to correct for that? Is there a way for me to speak truth to power, or do people just not care and I'm just going to have to live with it? That's a great way to understand that. If you're in a bigger organization, right, then your team and your department is going to have much more impact on your experience. And that's almost going to be the determinant of your experience. It's almost like you're in multiple companies. Then you really want to be trying to get access to as many people up and down the chain as possible. I don't think it's unreasonable to say after you've been extended an offer or around that time, if there's someone in the chain who you think could be important to your day-to-day experience, who you haven't had access to ask, is there an opportunity for me to have a 15-minute call with that person just to get familiar? Because that person's going to determine your future, right? There are shadowy figures at the top of departments that decide who's getting what bonus. And often if they haven't even met you, you don't even know that actually that person maybe has a bias against you, or they're actually not the kind of person, they're very tight and they don't really want to reward people. So that when it's department based, I'll look for visibility. And then again, when it's department based, your direct supervisor is going to have a huge impact on your experience. So let's make sure that we know if you do like them, make sure you feel comfortable that they're in it for the long haul.
Yeah. And another piece of that for, I guess, employees who are, have been at the company for a while, et cetera, like how can we maybe outside of just building community, protect our well-being, our mental health, just like, because we have to show up. It's 5 days a week, 8 hours, probably more each day. Like what can we do to make sure that we are not sinking into this just like spiral of doom with our tech companies?
Yeah, great question. No, it's a fantastic question. I mean, first of all, if you're at a really big tech company, there are resources available that your company is paying for. Make sure part of the reason that you're at a company of that size is for those resources. Make sure you're using all of them. All of them. There's mental health resources, there's coaching, all of these things, you should be reaching out and grabbing them. Second, personally, I think it's really important to have your own daily routine. Don't be waking up and getting dragged into a call straight out the gate. So you don't even know what's going on in the entire days of frenzy. You haven't eaten, it's 3 o'clock and now you're on another call, you're getting Slack messages. Like, let's build routine. Let's make sure that we're protecting ourselves. Now that we're outside of the gaze of companies where we're working from home and we get to set this for ourselves, we do still need structure. We do still need to be protecting ourselves. And then also make sure that you are, I know you said community, but community is a large part of it. And that doesn't just mean internally, with your ERGs, but also just make sure you're staying in touch with your friends. You are giving yourself that room to have a social life. And because, we often think about rest as if it's like a reward for doing hard work, but that's just not how our bodies work. It's actually required to be able to do that work. So when you take that time to relax and maybe you binge Netflix for 6 hours, all of that is part of getting your body back into its mechanism. I saw something this week that said procrastination is not laziness. It's your mind's way of telling you that you need to take more time. Maybe you're not prepared to do that task. I don't know if I'm quite ready to jump on that bandwagon, but I definitely think there's lessons to be learned about listening to ourselves more and trying to understand, like, why am I going to bed so late? Why am I hesitating to do this small piece of work? Like, what is stopping me from doing this? Am I not really passionate about this? If I am passionate, but I'm still hesitating, like, what is holding me back? Maybe I haven't rested enough. Maybe I'm doing too much. Maybe it's a time to seek help.
Okay, I'm glad this is recorded because I need to, I don't know, have this be my daily affirmations or something. Like, take some rest, like set some boundaries, set some routines. Because it's so easy to fall into this trap, and then again the spiral of doom. And it's like I can't show up in any way other than frustration and sadness. So thank you for all of that. We have a few minutes left, so I really want to just ask, what are you excited about for Inside Voices, for the next year? You don't need to reveal any, deep things in the pipeline or product roadmap, but just as a whole, Inside Voices, role in sort of increasing and making sure that companies are really putting us first and forward and making sure that employees have a safe space to go to share their stuff. So what's the future of Inside Voices, at least?
Yeah. First, I'm really excited about the software platform that we've built for companies. For me, it is rewarding to expand from helping people understand how badly companies are doing to helping companies do better, because it's very clear that most of them, even the ones that want to do better, have absolutely no idea how to do so. And they
Yeah.
can't even they can't even canvass their own employees effectively to find out why they're struggling. So it's great to be able to help. And if you're in an organization that you think needs help, please shoot me a note, jump on our website. And then the second is I'm really excited about the way that we're going to be using AI to improve the way people write reviews on the site so that we can help employees better reflect their experience, speak in a way that they can feel more comfortable about the fact that they'll stay anonymous. I hear from a lot of people, oh, I won't write a review because they'll know it was me. Well, not with this new method, right? We really want to get as many reviews on there as possible. And also we want to help people to write reviews that reflect their credibility, because there's a lot of ways that sort of the current typed reviews that we already receive, if there's a typo in a review, people think that that means that the person that wrote it isn't credible. Whereas if you actually speak to that person, you've got this extremely credible, rich source of information that could protect you from an environment that doesn't serve you and could actually be very harmful. So we're working very hard to improve the way that people represent themselves on the platform, and that should be going live in the next 3 months.
Ooh, that's quick. Okay, I love that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I hope that you're seeing all of the hand claps and fire and comments, etc., in the chat, because this was just really incredible and helpful. And just want to thank you again for your time and also what you have helped build for people who look like us. So thank you. And everyone, there are lots of like speaker bios, etc., that we have listed here in the platform. So if you want to follow or at least just like check out Inside Voices at the bare minimum, you can do that by clicking into Ekow's profile for more information there. The networking and lunch session is starting actually, I think, yep, it's noon, or 9 a.m. It's right now, so everyone can head over there. But thank you so much. This was great, and I hope you all have a good rest of your week.